Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Thursday, August the 22nd. So this is the news for Wednesday, August 21st, 2024, day 911 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And I see the peeps are coming in. Hey, Stacy. Hey, Vanetta. Hey, Cheyenne. Hey, Nicola. How you doing? Dean Carson, Jose. Hey, Jessica. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, Graham. Hey, Bernard. Hey, PH. Hey, Red Dog. Hey, Fitz. How you living, brother? Hey, Rob Walker. Hey, Joe. What do you know? Hey, Jay. How you doing, pal? Hey, Lars. I'm doing all right, man. You like that, Cheyenne? Rational Squirrel gave that to me in Kyiv a couple months ago now, or whenever that was. You like the oak tree, Nicola? It really resonated with me, I got to tell you. When I saw it there and I saw the dates on the trees, the park is filled with these mighty oak trees. Hey, Mad Mike. That have been here longer than this city, which wasn't founded until the mid-17th century. Long before the United States, long before we signed the Declaration of Independence, these oak trees were growing here. And the Russians keep trying to blow them up. They have survived everything for hundreds of years. They are going to survive this. Maybe missing a few limbs. Maybe not as tall as they were before, but with the potential to grow taller, regardless. So, ladies and gentlemen, today is August 21st, 2024. It is 56 years ago today that the Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia. Now, here we are 56 years later. 56 years later. And Czechia, the Czech Republic today, free and independent, out from under the thumb of Moscow, donated old Soviet tanks to the Ukrainians, T-72s. Those T-72s are right now back in Russia, fighting the Russians, looking to drive the Russians out of Ukraine and back into their own borders. 56 years later, that relationship with Czechia couldn't be stronger between the former Soviet bloc states that are trying to escape the gravity of the Moscow orbit and live their own independent existence, not as vassals, but as free and independent sovereign nations. And they're helping each other to get it done. Tonight's live would not be possible without the support of our sponsor, who is UA Flag Tesla, David Frazier. Now, David and I have become friends over the course of the last year or so, and it's only because of him that I am able to be in Kharkiv today. There's no way I could afford this trip. So I'm deeply grateful to David, and David is the sponsor of tonight's live. And tonight's live comes to you from Kharkiv. This is Ukraine's second largest city. It was founded 120 years before we signed the Declaration of Independence in the United States. It was the capital of Ukraine in the USSR days. Before the war, there were 1.4 million people here. About half of them fled at the full-scale invasion, but hundreds of thousands of them have come home since. And they are working brick by brick to undo the damage that the insatiable Russian horde has done to this city in its effort to level it. And make no mistake, that's the only song the Russian army sings. Scorched earth, baby. Level it all. And this is really it's hurting them right now, because now they're doing it on their own territory. Today, in Kursk, we are seeing Russian artillery shell Russian towns and Ukrainian positions. as well as glide bombs come in. They're dropping as many glide bombs on their own cities and people as they've dropped on Ukraine on a daily basis for the last 8 months. It's insanity. But from a one-trick pony with an absentee landlord, what else can you expect? And Putin is absent, boy, literally, physically, and figuratively. The guy has checked out. Putin, while Kursk is burning, while an enemy force is rolling over the border as if it wasn't there, Putin is in Azerbaijan. He's in Chechnya. He is Nero fiddling while Rome burns. He is an absentee landlord. He's a kid with an ant farm and a magnifying glass, I swear to God. Medusa, the Russian media outlet, says that Russia should prepare for this incursion of the Ukrainians on the territory of the Russian Federation to last for months. Now, look, mud season is coming, right? October 15th, baby. It's like clockwork around here. October 15th, tanks are going to stop being able to move because the rain is going to start, the mud is going to get heavy, and nobody's going to be able to move. If the Ukrainians aren't dislodged by October 15th, then they're staying for the winter. Get comfortable, my Ukrainian brothers. It's going to be a Russian winter for you. Because there's no way in hell. When you look at the disorganized response from the Russian side, you look at Putin off hobnobbing with the Chechens, getting the Azeris to join BRICS. I still don't know what he thought he could get from them, or whether it's just the PR win he was after, or he's just trying to take his mind off his troubles at home. But his eye is not on the ball. He has checked out literally and physically. The ISW talked about this today, saying that the Russian military command continues to complicate and bureaucratize. That was not a word I've ever seen before. But according to the ISW, Russian military command continues to complicate and bureaucratize the ineffective command and control structure. Now, we've seen this, right? Putin has put overlapping responsibilities on people. You got the FSB, you got mercenaries, you got Wagner Africa now is in the place. You got conscripts, you got regular Russian forces, you got VDK troops, all of them swirling in trying to do something, but without a structure or command in place. This has led to lots of friendly fire incidents. We've seen some very embarrassing things happen for the Russians this week, right? We saw 2 occasions where Russian convoys were destroyed by Russian planes. Helicopters, Ka-52 Alligator attack helicopters. Now, in the case of the first convoy, destroyed by friendly fire from a Russian helicopter, that pilot has been stripped of duty and sent to the front as an infantryman. The Russian mill-blogger community, especially fighter bomber, is up in arms over this. This essentially amounts, as fighter bomber said, to a summary execution of this pilot. This pilot, who was acting under orders, who was told to fire on this convoy of his own people, is now, without inquiry, without trial, without charges, summarily being sent to the front to be unalived as an infantry person. And that is not all that the ISW said on this subject of who's getting shoved into the infantry. The Russians are also redeploying specialists, like early warning radar specialists, out of the motor rifle regiment that was formed in the early part of this year and into the infantry. Why? Well, probably because they don't have the planes anymore for these guys to work with. So, or the equipment for these guys to work with. So they're demoting them all and sending them to the front as infantry. The ISW talks about this at some length in their reporting today, basically saying that one can come to only one conclusion from this action, that Russia is out of soldiers and is having trouble finding new ones. It is important to note, says the ISW, that this is also a terrible misuse of troops. The Russians have invested years of training in these people. Altogether, millions of dollars, but on an individual basis, hundreds of thousands of dollars of training and years of training. And now they're going to send them into the meat grinder. It's insanity. It's insanity of the first degree. Now, somebody just asked in the comments, is there an incursion into Bryansk? I am unaware of that. That's not to say that it's not happening, because that would be the next, well, I don't know. I would think that the next logical move would be Belgorod, and we've seen 3 cross-border incursions in Belgorod. That I can say for certain, without them taking or holding any substantive land. But they are poking and prodding. That's very clear. So what is happening in Kursk, and not in Bryansk to the best of my knowledge, Ukraine is targeting the engineering teams on the same river that are trying to reestablish the pontoon bridges that the Ukrainians knocked out yesterday. So the Ukrainians, as everybody should know by now, the Ukrainians have trapped about 3,000 Russian soldiers in about 700 square kilometers of ground south of the same river. So the same runs east-west across Kursk, and the Ukrainians blew all the bridges over the weekend and Monday. They've since blown one of the 2 pontoon bridges, and they have blown up or at least hit with missile strikes, the engineers on the ground trying to establish new pontoon bridges. They have been hit again today. The effect of this is that the 3,000 Russian soldiers south of the Seine are surrounded now on 3 sides by Ukrainian forces, and they can't get across the river or get resupplied across that river. And without food and without bullets, you cannot fight a war. It is just that simple. Despite Russia's best efforts, and despite the head of the Akhmat forces in Kursk saying for the 6th time today, they have stopped the Ukrainians and are pushing them back. This is such bullshit. The Ukrainians are continuing to advance. They are now in control of over 1,500 square kilometers and are looking to add another 700 with that area underneath the same river. That's the equivalent altogether of like 100 Avdiivkas in 3 weeks, basically, in 3 weeks, while it took the Russians months and months and tens of thousands of lives to take Avdiivka. So the Ukrainians are operating on a whole different level from the Russians. That should be clear to everybody by now, because the Ukrainians are doing all of this with far less resources, far fewer men, far fewer advantages. Russia had every advantage in this conflict, and yet the Ukrainians are kicking their asses. It's unbelievable. The world has rarely seen a David and Goliath fight like this at all. Most striking in all of this, I think, is the fact that Russia, a one-trick pony who can only do attritional grinding warfare and crush the enemy by leveling their towns and villages, scorched earth style, like it's fucking 1917, and there's still a czar. They are firing and leveling their own towns with aviation bombs and artillery today. It's unreal to think that Putin's 3-day special military operation has now resulted in the Ukrainians using donated Soviet tanks from the Czechs in Kursk, fighting the Russians, and the Russians are leveling their own towns and villages. It's insanity. For its part, the Russian response to the Kursk invasion has been sloppy and haphazard. These guys are all up in their own heads. They think the world of the Kremlin is the real world. So what are they doing in the Kremlin? Well, they have created a coordinating council. The coordinating council consists of 5 deputies. Those deputies are responsible for building defenses, logistics, evacuation of civilians, offensives. It's right bullshit. This is what the ISW is talking about when they say that Russia is complicating and bureaucratizing the what should be a military response. Why isn't the military in charge? Because Putin doesn't trust them. That's why. Because paranoid Putin, out of his mind after the Prigozhin insurrection, thinks he cannot trust his military. So rather than put them in charge and give them carte blanche to get the job done, he's fighting this war by committee. And that committee is under the control of his most trusted people, the FSB, who, while not military men, have that one quality that Vladimir Putin prizes above all else. They are loyal to him. The Kremlin has also created a special task force to address the needs of defending Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod. Now, the very fact that the special task force is there to protect Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod should tell you that at the very least, Moscow is worried about an incursion into Bryansk. They believe that that's on the table. Whether or not it's begun is another question. Moscow's one response to this incursion is hysterical to me. They have put out a pamphlet. You got 18,000 enemy troops controlling 2,000 square kilometers of your country, 220,000 of your own people evacuated. And you put out a pamphlet about information security for residents. Information security for residents of the affected oblasts include no CCTV, don't trust CCTV, no online dating. I swear to God, you cannot make this shit up. This is where their priorities are. Now, legitimately, right, you can do a honey trap with online dating. You can get in that way. So do not, but this is advice for people living there, not for the troops. Do not open emails from unknown users or click the links in them. I swear to God, like talking to your grandmother. No videos. Don't take videos and post them online. Don't do any live streams. Turn off Telegram's people near me feature, right? It's like Snapchat's Find My Friends thing. No personal or official data on your phones, and remove anything that identifies you or gives any personal information about you. This is, right, TKS Daddy? Oh, happy birthday, by the way, pal. This is the kind of advice that the troops in the field should have been following, and then New Year's Eve 2 years ago wouldn't have happened with 600 troops up in smoke in Donetsk. Remember that? That was a New Year's to remember. Now, on the subject of drone attacks, pardon me, I'm parched. It was like 100 degrees here on the trip here. And the vehicle that we're bringing for the Legion doesn't have air conditioning, I'm afraid. Anyway, 45 drones. The Russians claim that they shot down 45 drones last night. 11 drones were shot down over Moscow in what amounted to the biggest drone attack on Moscow of the year so far. I know it's only 11 drones, but it's the first time we've seen double-digit drones in Moscow this year. 20. Now this is interesting, and this may go to the Bryansk question. 23 of these drones that Russia claims to have shot down were shot down over Bryansk. So maybe Bryansk is heating up. I don't know. That's all I know, is that the Russians claimed that they knocked out 23 drones over Bryansk last night. And then 6 over Belgorod, 3 over Kaluga, and 2 over Kursk. On the other end of the equation, the Ukrainians shot down 50 out of 69 Shaheds, and then one missile out of an unknown number of missiles. I had a hard time getting a definitive answer on how many missiles were fired at Ukraine last night and how many of them were taken out. That is unclear to me at this juncture. But territorial defense did take out 50 of 69 drones. The Rada, now I brought to you the good news that the Rada, as of August 16th, had legalized medical in the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Today, the Rada voted to join the International Criminal Court. Now, as most of us, I think, are aware, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for both Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova, or whatever the fuck her name is, for kidnapping some 20,000 Ukrainian children from their homes and bragging about it. This is a war crime. Make no mistake. And these two are guilty of it. By joining the International Criminal Court, Kyiv moves closer in alignment to the West, binding itself to those democratic institutions that we think of as Western ideas. Regrettably, my own country, my own home, the United States of America, has yet to join the International Criminal Court. And that's because we have some people who belong there. Like Henry Kissinger, for example, would be a person that, as an American, I would want to see in The Hague. No joke. Though that will never happen, of course, but it's important to note that the U.S. is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, and it's my opinion that we should be. On the front line, now this is disturbing, so hold on to your hat here. It has been suggested by the Ukrainian armed forces themselves that the small incremental gains that we're seeing the Russians have in Donetsk is at least in part attributable to the Ukrainians shipping artillery, shells, and ammunition to Kursk, creating a shortage for the first time in the critical Donbass region since the U.S. aid started to flow after a 7-month hiatus. So to manage the operations in Kursk, the Ukrainians have intentionally redirected ammunition and firepower to Kursk away from the front in Donetsk. Because those troops in Donetsk are now rationing their shells, the Russians are advancing at a slightly accelerated pace than they have been. So much so that the town of Kursk is under a mandatory evacuation order. And the evacuation order was very clear. You people have 2 weeks to get out. So the Ukrainians know how many shells they have. They know the rate of the Russian advance. And it should be 3 weeks, by my math, until the Russians get into Kursk. But it's not unlikely that the Ukrainians built a little buffer in and said everybody's got to be out in 2 weeks. That math does make sense, and it's conservative to save the most number of lives. Now, one can ask the question, does this make sense? Should the Ukrainians be diverting critical resources at a critical time in the Donbass for this Kursk incursion, which could well turn out to be a folly? Because if Putin can marshal the resources and crush Ukraine in Kursk, it's going to be bad. This is a risk. This is a risk. For those of us who are paying attention, we think it's less of a risk than a lot of these analysts do, because we think that Russia simply doesn't have it. They don't have the men, they don't have the machines, they don't have the ammunition. They cannot simply roll over the Ukrainians in Kursk. It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. So given that, does it make sense to use the Donbass situation to trade time for land, land for time, land for land? Remember, the Russians are only advancing at the rate of about 5 kilometers a week. 5 kilometers a week. The Ukrainians in Russia are advancing over a kilometer a day in all directions. And now that they've cut off all those troops south of the Same, it's likely that that entire third of that region right there is simply going to fall into the Ukrainian hands. And we'll see another bunch of POWs released. On the front line, it is worth mentioning that New York has fallen and Toretsk is in the Russian sights. And so, as we say, the Russians are advancing down that way. Now, we've seen all these POWs taken, and there's been a trend. There's been an emerging series of videos that basically show the same kind of thing. POWs identifying themselves for the purposes of trading prisoners in a prisoner exchange, specifically getting back the Azov steel plant defenders. Ukraine, the Azov steel plant defenders have been in Russian custody for 2 years of torture, malnutrition, nightmare conditions, the absolute evil of the Russian gulag perpetrated on their minds and bodies and souls every day. And Ukraine would like them home. So they're starting with the commander of the 810th Marines, who was captured in Kursk. There's been a series of videos saying, "Hi, I'm Private Ivan, and I should be traded for the Azov Steel Defenders. I'm Private," etc., etc., etc. Now, whether or not this strategy is going to work is anybody's guess. But clearly, that's the play that the Ukrainians are making. They're trying to bet that the Russians are going to be willing to get these conscripts back, some of whom are going to be the sons of important people in St. Petersburg and Moscow. Get them back. They'll be willing to trade up the no. Joey Contino, how do you do? What a pleasure to see you. What an absolute pleasure to see you. Hey, pal, I'm in Kharkiv today, if you can believe it. Thanks for dropping by. I really appreciate it. Everybody say hello to Joey Contino, who is a guy everybody here should follow if you don't. Okay. Well, Mel, Russia is collapsing. How close they are is another story. Anyway, there does appear to be this coordinated PR campaign from the Ukrainian side to get the Azov guys back and to use their conscripts to do it. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians have targeted another S-300 system in the Rostov region, though we don't know for sure what was hit there, or at least I don't. Joey, if you do, chat it in, would you? Oh, and also, Joey, the question came up, is there any advance into the Kursk region? If you're aware of anything other than the 23 drones that the Russians claimed to have shot down last night, it would be great to hear from you, because I have no information on that at all. Finally, the very, very last thing that I want to do here. So I want to talk about the fire at the oil refinery in Rostov. There is this massive oil storage facility, diesel storage facility. There are 74 tanks. Each tank holds 5 metric tons of diesel fuel. You're talking about 360 metric tons of diesel fuel. And it got hit with drones 4 days ago now. And it got lit up. And then there was an explosion and 13 firefighters were hit and the fire spread. First it was 2 tanks on fire. Then it was 10 tanks on fire. Then it was 22 tanks. Now today it's 30. That's 150 metric tons of diesel. That's enough for the entire Russian army in all of Ukraine to run all of its vehicles for a week to 10 days. And those 30 tanks, they're burning out of control. They're going to spark other explosions. I cannot imagine at this juncture that there is any way to stop the whole 74 tanks from going up. And if that happens, if that's true, then the Russians are left. Well, 3 things about this. 1, they've lost all that fuel. That's huge. 2, they've lost the place to store all that fuel. That's going to be a problem. And then lastly, I would urge you to consider this, that this small fire started by 1 or 2 drones has had a chain reaction, just blowing up one thing after another until it's unstoppable. If that is not the perfect metaphor for the mistakes that Russia has made in getting itself into this war, I don't know what is. It is not only the perfect metaphor for the way that things keep blowing up in their faces, but for the end result. All of them burnt to a crisp, with nothing to show for this, except an oil stain on the face of Russia. Now, okay. So guys, a couple of things. I'm so happy to see Joey Contino here. Thanks for dropping by, Joey. I'm also happy to see all you guys that are here every night. It is always great to see you, Clay, Lars, etc. I want to thank the sponsor of tonight's live, David Frazier from UA Flag Tesla. If he's still awake, David, are you still awake? Maybe we can get you live tonight. I want to thank the moderator team, best moderator team on the Tickety Talk. Cheyenne, Vanetta PT, John Williams, J, and Travis, thank you all. And thanks for being here again. Thanks for the donuts, Trav. I appreciate it. Hey, Arn. Thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps public group on the Book of Faces. That's where these lives get republished every day. So if you like the lives and you like hanging out and you want to see one you missed, it's on the Facebook page. Thanks to Vanetta Larrett, who has the Dismantle Project 2025 Facebook group and our Google Doc share, where there are letters to Congress, the Senate, and the White House regarding the use of ATACMS on Russian land and on the establishment of a no-fly zone west of the Dnipro. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server in the Alexievich archive. That's it. Those are all my official thank yous, I guess. So I guess we'll go to Q&A. Is David Frazier here? Do we know? Was anybody able to reach out to him? You've asked Mr. Global to drop by. Right on, Paul. No, he isn't here. He's passed out again. It was a long drive, 300 miles in 100-degree heat today. It was a long drive, I got to tell you. Okay. Supporting Ukraine since 2014 and until victory. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, PH. I assume you mean F-16s, F in hell. We are there yet. We know that they are in country. We don't know what Ukraine is doing with them yet. Modi arrives, what's today, the 21st? Soon. I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look, Bobby. But you're right. Modi is coming. Peter, if they refuse to release any Azov defenders, would you hold on to conscripts? I mean, first of all, what I would do is irrelevant, right? All of this is up to the Ukrainians. And I think it's going to work. I think it's going to work. There's going to be a lot of pressure to get these kids home. We're already seeing it. There's a whole mothers movement pointing the finger at Gerasimov and Shoigu and others for this failure. And they're going to want to get as many of those conscripts back as they can before the Freedom of Russia Legion is able to recruit them. Don't forget, that's happening too. That's almost certainly an ongoing practice right now. So, I mean, what I would do, Russell, I don't even have any idea what I would do. As to what they're going to do, I think they're going to get the Azov guys back. I really do. At least I'm very hopeful that they are. Thank you, Paul. I sure do appreciate that. I published a series of videos today on Kharkiv. Not much, just some thoughts and introduction to the city. I'm going to go out and do some more tomorrow. Do you think the West will change their minds on long-range missiles? Yes, Clay. Of course I do. Because the West changes its mind about everything. Every red line that gets crossed, the West changes its mind. Aaron says, bring Joey in. Joey, you want to come in the box? I don't usually do that, but I would certainly make an exception in your case. Would somebody send Joey an invitation, please? If he's still here and if he wants to come in, it would be great to have him. Pastore, I think you're right. I think that the Kursk operation will help the Donbass front line. The Russians are half-assing everything. They've just moved, they're moving 5,000 troops from the Donbass up to Kursk. Now, first of all, it's only 5,000 troops. There's way more Ukrainians than that in Kursk. Plus, they're hundreds of miles away. Plus, they will be exposed on trains and buses and trucks to Ukrainian fire on their way there. It's likely that not all of them will make it in the first place. So I absolutely think that after that initial troop deployment, the Russians are very quickly find that they need to send more men. Well, where are they going to get them? They're going to have to pull them from Kherson, Donbass, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Murmansk, Kaliningrad, etc. Right? Anyway. Russia's running out of troops, example, using ill-trained Russian Space Force. Bobby, exactly. That's what the ISW pointed out today, that the Russians are taking their aerospace forces, some of their most well-trained pilots, radar operators, early radar warning and detection systems. Hey, Samso, how you doing, pal? Taking all of that training, and they're throwing them into the meat grinder. It's insanity. It's insanity. I don't know how else what else do you call that? Kursk could be the move needed to show that Russia is short on everything. Gunther, you hit it on the head. I couldn't agree more. Hey, Chris Carter, how you doing? The Tu-22M. Do you know how many Tu-22Ms Russia has left? Does anybody know? Can anybody tell me? The backfire bombers, the big backfire bombers of the Soviet era. Does anybody know how many Tu-22s? Mel says 30. Any other guesses? Any other guesses? That's a good answer, Mel. Because until this past week, to the best of my knowledge, there were 27 in service. With the loss of the one out west, we are down to 26. Kent, you're thinking of pre-full-scale invasion. P2's best guess, 26. Damn, Skippy P2, right on the money. If North Korea supplies, I hope they have to use them very rapidly. No testing. They're using them, right? We had 4 KN-2324s come into Kyiv last week, so they're using them. In War 3, I can't tell you anything about that. I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. I am not a weapons guy. I am not a military guy. So I have to prep on all of this shit. I've never even heard of that thing. I read Ukraine may want to move on to Moscow to let the people there know there is a war. Thoughts? That seems unlikely. An awful lot of things would have to happen to make such a thing even enter the realm of possibility, which at this juncture, I don't believe it is. I read Ukraine may, okay, right, we got that. Paul got it right too, to the best of my knowledge, got it right. It's hard to move big groups past Story. That's right. And you got to get 5,000 men, all of their shit and their machines, hundreds of miles away for something that is really, truly a pressing concern. That's Nero fiddling while Rome burns, baby. Oh, well, if PT doesn't know what it is, I'm in the clear. Ukraine has developed a new armored vehicle. Okay. Wouldn't the North Korean ICBM cause Article 5? I don't understand that question at all, Mel. North Korean missiles launched at Ukraine trigger a NATO doctrine when Ukraine is not in NATO? I don't follow that thinking. Peter, have you ever been threatened by Russia, focused on what you say about Russia? Hey, no. Let's see. Look, pal, I don't know who they are. This is T-Fall asking me if I've ever been threatened by Russia. I don't know who they are. And I have to say, I get very far fewer of them this summer than I was getting last summer. Last summer, I was getting death threats every other day. But they're threats. Let me tell you something. I've known a few very dangerous people in my life. Not one of them ever gave anybody any warning before they broke their nose. Genuinely dangerous people don't threaten you. They simply hurt you. So I never took any of it seriously, and I don't know who the threats were from, honestly. But yes, last summer, especially about this time, I was getting a stupid death threat every other day. So Russia, if you're listening, it's been a while since you've threatened my life. Please do so again so I can feel the love. Right, Russell, exactly, right? Common sense in crazy times. You are always full of common sense. I got to tell you, you really are. Sure, to fall. Good English, poor English. Yana, I don't know what you mean by that. Oh, in the threats, you mean? Yeah, it ran the gamut. Some of them sounded like they could have been Americans. Some of them were obviously native Slavic speakers. The guy there was a guy who called me on my WhatsApp one time. I don't know how he got the number. I don't know who he was. His picture came up. He appeared to be a Ukrainian army officer. And so I answered, figuring somebody had given this guy my number. And basically, the guy said that he was going to gut me like a fish on the street out in front of my apartment. And he mentioned the name of the restaurant that's there. So he had an idea of where I lived. He was very violent in his threats and graphic. And he clearly, English was not his first language. He was a person of Eastern European extraction. It's all love, baby. It's all love, Travis. What did you do to deserve that? Well, I like to think that I presented some semblance of the truth to people that the Russians don't want to know any truth. That's what I like to think anyway. Hey, Eli. Driving and shopping. God, you are an American. Have the F-16 made appearances in the Russian territory yet? They have, Bob. People have videotaped them. A guy who's on here regularly, Dutch Cossack, who's a buddy of mine, he saw them on his drive from Chernihiv to Kyiv. So he saw them in the sky. Other people I know saw them flying over. They did a flyover of Kyiv. So they're here. But V from Google. Oh, shoot. Where'd that go? V the Google says, there's an old saying that goes, barking dog doesn't bite. So threats aren't a serious thing, especially on TikTok. And V, I agree. I agree. Honestly, Nicola, I don't think it's that scary. One day on your subscriber only live, you gave people your WhatsApp. Oh, yeah, you're right, PT. I did do that. But, dude, that was like a year after this other thing. So no relationship there. And I've had personal interactions with every one of those people. Now, it's true, they may not be who they say they are. And maybe that was a stupid thing to do, but I am not that smart, guys. I'm an idiot in so many ways. The Russians like their own truth. The problem is, look, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But what you are not entitled to are your own facts. Give me a fucking break. Keyboard warriors, yeah. For all I know, they're just paid propagandists who are paid to make threats sometimes. Peter, how concerned are you of the traitor Elon Musk interfering in the war? I'm more concerned about the precedent that it sets. If we continue to allow billionaires to exist, they're going to increasingly be a problem. The concentration of wealth in the hands of a few is the biggest problem facing democracy today, in my opinion. And it is very much driven by this extraction economy, this dirty energy, fossil fuels economy, where the rights to exploit the resources of the planet, which should be for all our use, are restricted to the hands of a few. It's no good. We need a better system. You know, some might, but as a woman who constantly gets threats from insecure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it took me, I was not a young man when I was educated about the kind of violence that women face on a daily basis and the implications of violence and the casual way in which men talk about violence against women. And it was shocking to me that I was so ignorant on this subject, because I have 3 sisters and a mother and 2 grandmothers and lots of aunts and lots of women in my life. And I thought I was an ally or at least a friend. And it turned out that I was remarkably ignorant of just what that world looks like. If more Russian people found out about the war, what would they do? The Russian people all know about the war. They just know about it from a Russian perspective. And that's a very specific thing. The question, I think, magical, is how do we help the Russians to understand how the world views them as the aggressor here? How Ukraine was minding its own business when suddenly Russia climbed into its house, tied the wife to a chair, shot the husband, stole the children. Because that's what happened. The children, the microwave, and the toilet. Can Ukraine tell the difference in incoming shelling since they took land in Russia? It's a great question, Clay. I don't know the answer to that question. You learn what being an ally really means and how bad it is. Yeah, enlightening. Yeah. You cannot untrain an orc. You may well be right, Paul. And how number one was rescued by being... How no one was rescued by being flattened? I didn't really understand that comment. They need to bring in their backyard so they'll know what Ukraine is going through. Maybe. Russians know but are too afraid to do anything about it. Yeah. How is Kharkiv holding up? Bobby, this magnificent old city, this city is about 400 years old. It's about 400 years old. Replete with, that kind of reassuring Habsburg mustard yellow architecture everywhere you look. But all the windows are broken out and boarded up. Because, in fact, some of those buildings have no insides. where because a missile has hit them and hollowed them out, and all that's standing are the marble columns and the facades. There is not a street that I have walked down where the windows aren't blown out on both sides of the streets in every building, at least some windows. You can't walk across the plaza in front of the concert hall without noticing in the marble steps where 152 millimeter artillery shells have exploded. You can't walk by the hammered bronze Soviet architect or Soviet style Soviet sculpture in front of that theater without noticing the shrapnel holes in it. Today, I met a guy who goes by the call sign Camel Toe. That's a serious thing. Who stepped on a landmine and lived to tell about it. And he showed me his car. His wife showed me the shrapnel holes in the vehicle, showed me the bullet hole in the roof. And the first thing I noticed about the bullet hole in the roof was that the metal was popping out. So wait a minute, I said, did he discharge his weapon in the vehicle? No, come here, she says. And she takes me around the back to the back windshield. There's the entry. The sniper was shooting at the driver's head from behind and missed him, her husband, by about 5 inches. 5 inches. So just like that truck, this city is full of holes. It's full of burned out buildings, ruined facades, crumbling roofs, walls, support structures, but the city stands and is vibrant and full of life. We had ice cream after dinner at a cafe, and I watched a family with 3 young children feed the crusts of bread to the pigeons, jackdaws, and crows. It was a very pleasant evening despite the heat. And this is not a joke. In the 6 hours, now it's midnight now. We got here about 3, so that's 9 hours, right? In the 9 hours I have been here, there have been 4 air raid alerts and the sound of distant explosions. So it's a real thing. It's a very, very real thing. So no Joey Contino, though it was very nice of him to drop by. He is a superstar, no doubt about it. No sign of David Frazier. Okay, so let me say this. Guys, I could not afford to do this trip alone. David is insisting on paying for everything. I know he cannot afford it. If anybody can help a little bit, that would be great. So that would really be great. Any help would be appreciated. David is sleeping. He probably is, the poor bastard. The vehicle's a standard. I don't drive standard. I hate to admit that, but I couldn't help with the driving, and it was 6 hours one way. So anyway, that's my situation. It's 1 o'clock here. Any final thoughts? Anything pressing for anybody? Kherson, Zaporizhia. What about them? Do you need to know how to spell them? To the best of my knowledge, nothing is happening in Kherson. In Zaporizhia, of course, yesterday, we saw the very tragic Russian shelling of a children's cafe, and 1 child was unalived. JSAMs are a possibility, as I understand it, but here, I'm not a weapons expert. This is what I understand about the JSAMs. They've got a 370 kilometer range, I think. It's a good range, right? They're a long range air to surface missile, and they would essentially do the job that Ukraine wants the ATACMS to do. But the U.S. could give them JSAMs and keep their position on the ATACMS so they don't lose face with that. and still get the job done. But we'll see. Thanks, Van. You are the best. Your personal opinion or fact that should the U.S. allow Ukraine? Oh, I absolutely support untying Ukraine's hands and permitting the use of ATACMS on Russian soil. I absolutely support that. It is insane not to, in my opinion. Thank you, Van. I'm going to give you a cheerleader thing. Hey, Samso, thanks, pal. Samso and I are planning a pig roast on a Crimean beach after this war. For anybody that's interested, start saving your pennies. We'll rent out a hotel. Thank you, Marilyn. Where are you tonight? I'm in Kharkiv. Thank you, user telephone number. Thank you, Russell Kennedy. I sure appreciate it. Listen, seriously, guys, I don't like David paying for everything, and I don't have any money to help. So the PayPal is in the description. I don't have any live sponsors for the rest of this week. So you could get a live sponsorship. And my deep personal gratitude. ATACMS will hasten the end of the war. I think you're right, Bobby, especially if we untie their hands. You got your Crimea gear already. Boy, you are an optimist, Samso. But you are an optimist, pal. I'll tell you. If you guys don't follow Samso, he's worth a follow. ER extended range. And Jessica's talking about UA flag Tesla is David Frazier's account. If you guys don't follow David Frazier, you should. He's a hell of a guy. Really is. Heard on BBC today that Zelensky admitted to using U.S. weapons. Dude, he doesn't have to admit to using U.S. weapons. The only U.S. weapon that is currently under sanction is the ATACMS. And they can't be used on Russian targets at all. So there's nothing to admit to. Doesn't make any sense. Crimea by 2027? No. It's not going to take that long. I got this feeder pig already. It's at 100 pounds. It's good. All right. I got to get to bed. We got an early morning tomorrow. Look for more videos about Kharkiv. And, guys, the only reason that I can be here for you is because you are here for me. And I really appreciate it. Thank you all very much. Make it a great day.